This is an opportunity for us to sort of reflect here in 2015 on some key social movements, a set of moments that took place not only globally, not only nationally, but locally and at the state level.
My name is Warren Watson. I'm the founder and former head of the Colorado Black Panther Party, a group that I decided was necessary, and that was because of what was happening in this country a half century ago.
I've had juvenile rheumatoid arthritis since I was 7 years old, and needed to have some surgery and got that all done. It interfered with my schooling, and I didn't have a wheelchair when I came here. I had no way of getting around by myself, and that all changed miraculously. I've been very, very fortunate to have the help of so many people in this community.
Good evening, thank you for being here. I just want to clarify, my name is Jessica Bordeaux Hill. My Lakota name is Desanwi, White Buffalo Woman. I'm a member of the Sechanhu Lakota Nation from the Rosebud Reservation. And I'm a former member of AIM, the original AIM.
Hi. I am a founder of the National Association of Black Journalists, and the reason that we founded the group, I'll just use myself as an example. I started at the Denver Post as the only black journalist, black woman journalist in Colorado. I was hired while I was still in graduate school at the University of California, Santa Barbara. And I was basically all by myself. And all over the country, there were black journalists who were all by themselves.
I grew up in Denver not knowing about gay history or gay culture really. I went to Denver West High School and I never really even learned about Corky Gonzalez or the civil rights movements that went on there with the Chicanos in the 1960s. In 2009, I interned here at History Colorado, and I ended up doing my student teaching about 2 years later. A year after that, I was involved in the civil unions debate here in Colorado. And for the first time in my life, I came face to face with people who thought differently than I did about sex and gender and many things. No gay kid or kid in general should grow up with the kind of ignorance I had grown up with regarding sex and gender history in Colorado. And as a graduate student, I began to do a lot of research into it. And I found that there was nothing written on this subject.
Was there any particular comment by another panelist that sparked something in you that you'd like to respond to or elaborate on?
Before the Europeans came, we had our own way of raising our children. We had an extended family, and when we were put on reservations, that changed, and there was an effort to change that. It broke up, or tried to break up the family by putting children in boarding schools. Many people kept that, revived that unity and that bringing the family back together. And on the reservations at the time I was a teenager, if there was issues with the mom and dad, there was grandma. If something happened, then there was grandma. At this point in time, a lot of our elders are leaving us. And children, because with my reservation, the Rosebud Reservation, and other reservations, there's a high rate of alcoholism. And now, there didn't used to be a lot of drugs, now there's more drugs. Well, if children see their parents involved in that, they could go to grandma. But if you're losing your elders, then what? So there's a high rate of suicide.
So what do you see the challenge to journalism itself, to be an advocate for those who are invisible?
I would say to keep doing what they're doing. If you do read the paper at all, we have done series on homelessness. We have done series on about every problem that there is. Sometimes it doesn't make any difference. I remember myself going to and spending about 3 days at what they call them, housing projects. And I remember starting out the story saying cockroaches and kids and problems that grow faster than either. And the papers do try to do that. But as you said, social media is so many different things. One thing though you can count on with the paper is that at least somebody checks some facts sometime, you know, as opposed to a lot of social media people just say, well, I'll just blog this when I feel like it, you know.
My question in terms of movements, because that's what's bringing us here and into this discussion this evening. So I'm really curious to know from your perspective of what's one or two things that keep movements going, and what kept you in it when the time became difficult? Because movements are not easy to sustain. So for the point in time that you were there, what kept you in it? And do any of you have any thoughts and ideas about what can sustain a movement?
They've got to be people that have a passion for change, a passion for improvement.
I'd be somewhat remiss if I didn't say that there are people out there that are deep in the struggle. They may not ever make the news in any form, whether it's print or visual, but there are people in this community who are pushing that stone uphill to be able to create some change. And for me personally, the question has never been, what are we gonna do? I push myself every day to say, okay, Carolyn, what are you going to do? Because I think Dr. King, through his teaching, he said, it's just doing one thing. It's standing up and being able to have the courage to put your voice in the room, or your voice with a person and say, I'm sorry, you just spoke really ugly to this young lady here. However you phrase it. But it's not this big, huge thing. And I don't think our leadership is going to look the same. There will not be one singular leader for any racial or ethnic group or any group of different abilities or the LGBTQ community. It's going to be a plethora of us working collaboratively in some cases and working independently. And Lauren, you got down. And I remember when I moved to Denver, I was told we had a Black Panther. See, I came from Gary, Indiana. So when they talked about Black Panthers, I was like, really? Where are they? And they told me it was Lauren Watson and it was Clark. But how many people really were there? But you still made a difference with a very small number. You never, unless correct me if I'm wrong, you were ever as large as what CORE was here. But you made a difference. So I guess that's my only commentary. So I'm not discounting, sir, what you said, because I think your point is absolutely correct. But I also know there are some people in this community who are moving mountains, in the Native American community who are moving mountains every day.
You know what?
Thank you.
They started hiring Black journalists because they needed people to go out and cover the Panthers and cover the riots. And they knew that they couldn't send those little white reporters to go do it. That was one of the things, seriously, that opened up journalism to Black people.
But there are humble heroes. You know, before there was American Indian movement, there was Crazy Horse. And he was a movement, but he was a man. It was humble heroes. Here in town, there's a woman who has been active. She's a Dene, Navajo woman. And she's been involved with all kinds of different things to make changes. And she's done it on her own, you know, as an individual. So I think the biggest thing is, you know, if there's movement and it's a vehicle and it can bring attention and it can make a change, that's great. But if you're an individual and you have something that you can give and make things aware to the general population and it can make a change, then I think that's the way it's going now. Things have changed. When we talk about what happened, when I talk about what happened back when I was younger, things have changed a lot. You know, we didn't have on my reservation in the old days, we didn't even have an ambulance, we didn't have paved streets. We still don't have paved streets, but there's street signs and stoplights and all of that. Didn't have phones, didn't have, now there's cellular phones, but of course it's limited what you can do, but it's even society has changed for our children, And I think the children use the media. If there's a way to use the media, again, she had a really good comment, you know. You don't know what's the truth when it goes out in the media. The media is a good thing because it gets out there and it gives information, but it may not always be the right information or correct information. So that's the danger of it. But really, that's the way our kids have moved. You know, I have, like I said, I have 5 children, 10 grandchildren, 1 great-grandchild. That's how they communicate. When we're going to have a get-together, they text each other. If I need, you know, someone like tonight, you know, I babysit and I pick up grandchildren, and they text each other and said, you got to be home by this, you got to do this, and you know, that's our reality today. But humble heroes, individuals, you know, movements are good, but humble heroes are good too.
My main concern when it comes to young people is to make sure that they don't find themselves going to or doing the same things that have already been done. There's those people who say that the definition of insanity, which we've all heard, we know what that is. And so I'm concerned when I see people getting together when someone is executed, for example, and executed and assassinated in the community, and the Christian preachers get together and they say, okay, well, we need to march on Washington. And it ought to be clear to us 50, 60 years after we marched on Washington that marching on Washington is not the answer. There have been several marches on Washington since the one that my sister was in 1963. Since then, I've been on 3 marches that I can remember to Washington. Now, in the issue of African American freedom, the solution to that problem is not in Washington, D.C. because it is not as I said before, a problem of civil rights. It's a problem of human rights. The Human Rights Committee is a United Nations committee, not a congressional committee. And as Malcolm said, when you take your case to Washington, you're taking your case to the criminal. And then what we need to do is to take the criminal to court. And that means that we need to go to, if we're going to march to somewhere where it can do some good.
There are 2 things which sustain a movement: the youth and the truth. It's the youth in the street and the truth that you tell them. And every single one of you here is a truth teller and a storyteller. But the one thing that we're not really doing is telling our stories, which is exactly what this institution is about. So the one thing that every single human being here can do is to take their truth to the streets, is to take their truth to the youth. And the way you do that is just by having youth talk to you, is by going to the schools. Hope springs eternal, and if I saw 75 kids tell me that I'm not worth a damn because I'm gay, but then I see 5,000 kids march down East Colfax Avenue from the Capitol to East High School protesting police violence, and I see kids going to city council meetings and board of ed meetings in Jeffco to protest political machinations there, that's the hope. You see, because it's people like you who take your stories to these kids that spur them to do what they do. And it's injustice motivated by what they see that carries that forward. Not necessarily person to person or generation to generation, but as part of the human story. So that's the way to sustain the movement, is to bring your stories to this institution so that they can bring it to the community.